If you're planning to build a brand online, then you'll need a domain name. And if you're smart, you'll know that if chosen correctly, a domain name can be a fantastic aid to your branding and marketing efforts. Today, more than ever, it's important to choose domain names that are short, simple, meaningful, brandable, global, and relevant. One new domain extension that checks all these boxes is .online. It's a domain name for anything that's online. So make the most of the branding opportunity and get your very own .online domain for 90% discount for the first year using my code Jeff, Jeff in capital letters at www.get.online. Hi everyone and welcome to the Jeff Bullis Show. Today I have with me Mark Schaefer. Now Mark and I go back quite a long time. I think we're talking something like about 10 years, I think the first time we connected. And we've become really good friends, even though he lives in the USA in a beautiful place called Knoxville, Tennessee. And I live in another place called Sydney, Australia. Now, Mark and I met through, I think, places like Twitter and blogging. I think we met virtually first. We were part of a tribe of discoverers and explorers of the social media as it emerged back in 2008 and exploded into everyone's consciousness. And Mark wrote a lot about social media. He's written a lot of books. And we're going to have a chat today about his latest book, Cumulative Advantage. He's also read other books, which we're going to discuss as well. So a little bit about Mark, apart from the fact that he's a great man and a great friend of mine, and I'm honoured to have him as a friend. Mark is a globally recognised author. He's written about 8 books, I think. He's a business consultant called businessesgrow.com. He writes a blog and is also known as one of the top 5 marketing blogs on the planet. And he teaches classes at Rutgers University. And he's consulted to many big clients like Pfizer and Cisco and Dell, to name a few. And he's also been on CNN, the Wall Street Journal, and New York Times and CBS News. So, hi Mark, welcome to the show.
Hi Jeff, it's so good to see you. I've missed you. It's been too long.
Yeah, it's been way too long. I think it's about 2 or 3 years since I think we were at
You think?
San Diego, was it? I think
San Diego, I think. Yeah.
At Social Media Examiners Social Summit.
Mm-hmm.
So we've met there a few times, and I also spoke at Mark's event called Social Slam, and I think that's about 7 or 8 years ago, and I got to meet a bunch of other people that were what we called the social media adventurers tribe almost. It was people that discovered social media, what they thought it could be used for to grow businesses, and we started writing about it and building tribes globally. While you had the actual opportunity to, because everything was organic back then, whereas today the algorithms are stopping, I think, tribes connecting. Because
Very true.
Because Mark Zuckerberg and the others have put filters in place to stop us connecting. They want us to be pay to play. And we're going to do a little bit of chat about that as well. But Mark, let's talk a little bit about your journey and how you got to start the blog, businessesgrow.com, and then how you got to start writing. And we're going to talk about your book a bit, and we're going to go down a few other rabbit holes and maybe some of the stages of that. So what got Mark into blogging, business consulting, social media? When did it all start? And I know you've got a corporate story before that. So
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, it all sort of blends together. One of the things I talk about in my book is that we're all surfing the crest of a wave that started a long time ago. All these little things that happen to us, friends, mentors, bosses, companies, jobs, relationships, they all sort of work over time to forge where we are today. And, I was thinking there's a story in my book that kind of like points directly to why I'm here with you today. And it just seems like the most random thing. But when I was in the corporate world, I was stuck in this marketing job, didn't really know what was next. And the internet was starting. And so I had this idea. I think there are business applications for the internet. And I asked my boss if I could get an AOL account and put it on my expense account. And after a long debate over why he thought this was a waste of money, he agreed. And then I had these ideas and they worked. And then a few years later, the Fortune 100 company woke up and said, we need an e-business department. Who shall run this thing? Well, Mark, you've been on the internet longer than anybody else. It will be you. And that began my career really in the e-business digital space. And that's, you can point to that one conversation as this initial advantage that led me to you today. I eventually started, quit that company, quit that job, started my own thing. This is, again, when social media is going mainstream. This is the time you and I started connecting. I started this blog. Doggone it, the blog just took off. How many people were blogging back then that had Fortune 100 marketing experience? None. So I sort of stood out in a way. Then that led to books. The books led to speaking. It led to the position at the university. So like advantage leads to advantage. You keep opening these doors as they're presented to you. You know, you have to know the smart ones to open and the right ones to close. And it takes you on this path to where I am today. And I've mostly made good decisions.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating. When I started reading your book, Cumulative Advantage, I noticed that you shared stories about people and how they started. And you mentioned the word spark. But what I think I detected and what I read and what I totally agree with is that despite all the plans you can write, quite often what you end up doing is something you never planned for, and it shows up. Tell us a bit about that, the spark. And yeah.
I think so much of that. I mean, almost everybody I know can relate with that. I mean, when I was a little boy, I wanted to be an astronaut. I didn't have a dream of being a digital marketing consultant. Jeff, I didn't write my first book. I've written 9 books now. I didn't write my first book till I was 50. I didn't write my first blog post till I was 48 years old. And so, I mean, it's been this constant journey of reinvention and just morphing into the opportunities that are presented. And so I think that's a big part of most people's reality is oftentimes you don't follow a dream. The dream follows you. I love what I do. I have fun every single day, but this was not my dream. This was not a plan. It was not a vision that I had. I just followed the path and made decisions that sort of aligned with my lifestyle. I turned down big opportunities. I could have been the CMO of a big company. I could have been the CEO probably of a big company. I just didn't want that lifestyle, that sacrifice. And even now, I leave money on the table every single day with opportunities because I make a choice for lifestyle. It's just much more important to me than the money. I'm fine with where I am.
Well, it's very it's fascinating to hear, and I totally get that. I think choosing your path, getting the calling, and we've talked a bit about this before we hit the record button here. But there's a Japanese, I think, author philosopher that uses the term ikigai or kagai.
Yeah, ikigai. I think they say, yeah.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about ikigai because it's something that really resonates with me. It's where what you're meant to be doing is the intersection of a multiple number of things that are an important part of our life.
Yeah, this is a really important part of the book, I think, because it's not just about having a passion. It's not just really about having a dream, but it has to relate. It has to be relevant. It has to resonate with both your lifestyle and your dreams, and also sort of the current environment. You want to do if you just follow something that no one cares about or no one's willing to pay for, then ultimately, you're going to be miserable because you're not going to be able to support yourself. So it's really sort of a blend of what do you believe in and what do you hope for and what do you enjoy and what's the world telling you that they want you to do. There was a point when I was starting my second career, about the same time as you, and there was actually a point where I didn't have any strategy. And I just wanted to see where the world was going to take me. I know this sounds very odd because most people in our world, they're all about strategy. They're all about monetization. And I didn't really know. Would people hire him? Was I going to make money writing? Was I going to make money teaching? Was I going to make money, being a speaker, a consultant? And what are those things I was going to enjoy the most? My first idea, my first vision when I was an entrepreneur, it really worked. I made a lot of money and I hated it because it was just too much drudgery and too much detail. And I'm a big picture, big idea kind of person. So it didn't fit my lifestyle. It wasn't part of my ikigai, as I talk about in the book. And ultimately, I made choices that took me off the path of momentum, took me off the path of, let's say, more celebrity or fame, because I like being in the sunshine on the lake. I like playing tennis with my wife on a nice day. To me, that's more important than the hustle lifestyle, maybe that leads to that sort of celebrity and fame.
Yeah, I totally get that because I think you've got to choose your own path. We're all different, unique people as humans, and I don't believe there's one path for all of us, but there is a number of paths we can choose, and I think getting that calling. And that calling will be an intersection, like you mentioned, of many things. It's going to be innate ability. It's what you love doing. It's what sort of life you want. It also comes down to, your experience. What have you done in the past that shows up at the right time? And
Right.
And this is the path. It's the calling. And I love it when Steven Spielberg, in a very short 2-minute video on YouTube, he says, what you're meant to be doing on the planet will show up as a whisper. It will not shout.
Right.
And I think all of us have got to give ourselves enough quiet time to actually hear that whisper. It's fascinating because a lot of people live lives of what I call quiet desperation, and I feel pity for them because, in essence, they are just turning up at work and they go to the grave with their song unsung. And I certainly do believe that as humans, we all have a gift to share. Sometimes it's buried and sometimes it's never acted on. And I think that's the other thing we're going to discuss as well. So the first step in the book you mentioned, I think, is the spark, and you call it the initial advantage, as you describe it. So tell us a little bit about that.
I do hope we get back to that part about everyone can sing their own song and at different levels, because that's, as you know from my book, and thank you for reading it, it was a revelation for me, really, about how all this fits together. And this idea of initial advantage is it sort of goes back to the story I told about this, a conversation with my boss got me on the internet. I was the first person in a Fortune 100 company to be on the internet. And literally it leads me to this conversation I'm having with you. Like it's, a kind of a direct line. And the thing that I think is one of the ideas that creates hope in this book is that there's nothing in this book that's not accessible by anyone. You don't have to have $1 million to create momentum. You don't need a Harvard education to create momentum. And the first spark can be something random. It could be an idea. But the important thing is the pursuit of curiosity. Now, you and I have both gone down, we have like the spider web of opportunities in front of us all the time. And we have these ideas, but they mean nothing if we don't pursue them. It's the quest, right? I had this idea where I could maybe have these business applications on the web, but if I didn't push it with my boss, I would not be where I am today. It's just that simple. I tell this story in the book where I had this idea, sort of this hunch about how power was shifting in the world. And there was someone working on technology around the first influence marketing algorithms. And I waited in line for like 45 minutes at a conference to speak to this guy. And when I spoke to this guy, all of a sudden, everything clicked. It was like a runway at an airport lighting up. And I had this vision of, oh my gosh, we are on the cusp of a whole new marketing revolution. Pursue the idea. If I didn't wait in line and talk to this guy, I never would have had that runway moment.
Yeah, and that's
so it's not. It's sure. These ideas are presented to us. These sparks are presented to us all the time. But we also have to have the quest. We have to have the quest and pursue the idea.
Yeah, my aha moment was the intersection of 3 books, actually 2 books and 1 blog post.
Fantastic.
So the first book I read was Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek, which opened my eyes, which I'd already been noticing that the internet is where you can make money and start a business. And I've started businesses, many over the years. And then there was a book by David Meerman Scott called New Rules of Marketing and PR. And he talked about being able to sell by attracting people to you through content. It was a term that back then was inbound marketing and coined by HubSpot and David Meerman Scott. And I went, wow, so instead of chasing customers, I could actually attract customers. This was an aha moment for me. And went, as a salesperson in marketing, having to make cold calls was something I hated, detested, and had to do every day, 2 hours a day, cold calling. And I said, wow, it flips it the other way. You attract customers too. And then there was a blog post by HubSpot, and they said, if you have an inkling of a business idea, just start a blog. Luckily for me, I did start. I started a blog in March 2009. And it's acting on the spark. And sometimes, look, no one was screaming at me, start a blog, Jeff, start a blog, start a business. Yeah. As Steven Spielberg said, it is a whisper. And then you've got to act on the whisper, that spark.
By the way, I started my blog in April of 2009.
I think I bet you by 1 month.
You're my senior. You're my senior.
Slightly. Okay. So, all right. So the spark, then acting. And then we talk about, you talked about the seam as the next part of it. And tell me what you mean by the seam.
Well, when you and I were growing up in the business world, there were a lot of ideas about strategy that kind of fell apart when the internet revolution occurred. And I think today, the speed of the world, the speed of change really defines strategy, or perhaps redefines strategy. And that's what I talk about in the book, that if you have an idea, you need to test it against an opportunity. And the opportunities occur when there's a fracture in the status quo. Now, right now, just about everything in our world is a fracture in the status quo. In a pandemic, at least here in America, it's been a little calmer in Australia. We've had to find new ways to work and learn and exercise and connect. And sometimes, when I had COVID, my wife had COVID, we were quarantined for 60 days. We had to find new ways to eat, find new ways to get groceries when we couldn't leave our house for 60 days. And it created lots of pain, but it was a fracture in the status quo that also created lots of opportunities. I predicted last March that there would be more startups in America than any time in our history, and that has come true. We've had a lot of business failures, unfortunately, but we've had more startups than failures. And so the theme is this combination of speed and space and time. And when I spent time in Australia, I just got addicted to Australian rules football. And it's the same sort of thing, is that you find this opening and you take that ball far as you can, as fast as you can, until the seam collapses. And then you've got to find another way to go forward. And that's really what strategy is about today. It's about applying that spark, that idea, which starts the momentum. And then you drive through that scene, just like you did with your blog. I remember those days. I remember how consistent you were, the risks that you took, the generosity that you had with other people. And you were pushing and pushing and pushing new ideas, constantly trying new ideas. You were always pushing new seams. Some of them worked, some of them didn't. But the ones that did, boom, you would shoot through faster than almost anybody else. So, I mean, you're a great role model for that. And that's what we need to do today too. And it can be as simple, really, as the HubSpot thing, as starting a blog. It's probably not that simple today, but you can test things today in many ways like you never could in the past.
Yeah, and that's what's really fantastic about the digital world in which we live is you
Yeah.
can test fast, fail quickly, and do it at low cost.
Even crowdfunding has sort of rewritten the rules of testing a seam.
Yep. Yeah, I'm so privileged and grateful to be living in this time in the world, despite the good things as well as the bad things. And I think
Yeah.
we're in the middle of just incredible change. It almost makes my head spin. And the other thing that is important is you said, the scene, you got to go for it. And this leads us to another part of the discussion I think we had before was you never arrive and going, I'm here. This is it. I have arrived, because change is constant. You have to keep evolving and to keep looking for the next thing. And that could be still in the same industry you're in or part of it. So I think as entrepreneurs and as humans, it's very important to keep evolving on the journey that we strike out on.
Yes. Absolutely. And that was a lesson that I learned recently, where I'm looking into the last third of my life now, and I was thinking, okay, like what's the next step on the journey? What should I be working toward? I don't want to wind things down. I want to wind things up. And I went on a hike with my friend, and he said, well, why do you think you're not winding things up right now? Look at the journey that you're on, and you're helping people. You are having an impact on the world. Why in the world would you even think about something else? And it helped me just put things in perspective, is that really the journey is the goal. The path is the goal. If your goal can be on the right path, I'm happy every day. I'm joyful every day. I have fun every day. It's rewarding. People tell me that I changed their lives. I've changed their business. How can you ever imagine a better place to be? And so it was a great perspective for me, and a point of humility to realize, hey, just as long as you're on this path, that's okay. Just keep growing on the path that you're on.
Yeah. And don't be distracted by the shiny new toys that could actually take you off the path. I think that's the other thing.
Exactly. You can't forget what brought you there. What is your core competency that's lighting up the world, and don't lose sight of that.
Yeah. And it's taking your talent and evolving it. I've written poetry over the last year or two. Some of them I've shared publicly and written them as blog posts just to test it out. Because I discovered I love word wrangling, and I do it in a variety of ways. And you do much the same. You've written 9 books now, and you fell in love with words, and also you have a gift of distilling complexity into simplicity. I think
Oh,
that's
thank you.
I think that's to be admired. And I think your latest book is more about getting to the heart of being human, which I think is fabulous. And I think as we all grow a little bit older, we start to reflect a little bit more, and we're going, okay, so what brought me here, or what's the meaning of what I'm doing today? And so let's move on to the next step. The sonic boom is your third step in your book that you mentioned, or a pillar.
Yeah.
Yep.
It would be interesting to hear how you relate to this, because you certainly built a huge amount of momentum. And I know pieces of your story, but I'm not sure I know this part. So the idea is you have an idea. It sort of fits your view of how you fit into the world. You test the seam, you burst through the seam, and hey, there's an opportunity here. You are building momentum. Now, what's the next step? How do you get to the next level? People have to hear about you. And this is very, very difficult. I think the number one issue for any person, any business in this world today is this: how can I be heard? So in this part of the book, I talk about some nuances, some new ways to think about becoming known in the world, becoming heard in the world, how things really catch on. I refer to some very significant research by our mutual friend Steve Rayson. And so, what was your story? What was like? Was there something that just sort of pushed you into the mainstream? You were kind of blogging. And I mean, it's just like all of a sudden, Jeff Bullis is like freaking everywhere. You're huge. So, I mean, was there something that helped you do that, or was it just a result of the consistent work?
Um, Initially, I got onto Twitter and I realized how simple and easy it was to use. And so Twitter became my megaphone.
Yeah.
And then I decided to relentlessly pursue growing my following. So today I've got about 560,000 Twitter followers.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and I realised that gave me my voice. It allowed me to break through and be heard globally, especially when Twitter is in its early phases. And also, the reality was up to about 2013 that the algorithms hadn't hit their stride yet. They really hadn't been really tweaked. And so this led me to saying, I think this is going to end some stage. I think the platforms are going to make it harder and harder to have your voice heard. So I doubled down on Twitter. And along with that, I actually got onto multiple other platforms. We both chased shiny new toys. You had to be ubiquitous. In other words, to be everywhere. And that included Instagram, it included Pinterest, it included LinkedIn, included Facebook, included optimizing your blog content so it ranked on the first page of Google, SEO. And I had to remind myself all the time what SEO meant, search engine optimization. So the reality was I decided to be ubiquitous and I doubled down on Twitter, but then I didn't forget the other channels. And I think you have a look at anyone that has the sonic boom, you just look at Gary Vaynerchuk. They don't rely on one channel. They're everywhere. Tim Ferriss, he's everywhere. He started a blog. He started a podcast. He was big on Twitter. He also is very, very good at the physical networking as well, showing up at trade events. And this is what you do for your public speaking, for example. You go and speak, and you are doing a one-to-many promotion. You're on stage talking to thousands of people. So, and that's a very powerful way. And I think, and we've forgotten sometimes how powerful personal face-to-face communication is, and even one-to-one. So, the sonic boom is a tough one, and in a very crowded digital world now, it is because there's many more voices. And you talked about it in Content Shock as well. It's just your book, and it was a blog post you wrote that gave you a lot of attention. Okay, and that was a bit of your sonic boom, wasn't it? So
It was part of it. Yeah.
yeah,
I think writing books has helped me. It almost seems like when I write a book, it kind of like takes me to a new level of attention. Sometimes it attracts a new audience depending on what I'm writing about. It provides something new for me to speak about and be relevant to people in a new way. So to me, each book is like a step up. It's like stepping up into some new sphere of relevance. So, having people become aware of you in that way is important. And then the next step I talk about, and I think this is the most powerful thing, is reaching up and reaching out, is to think about who is already up there that can open up an opportunity for me, that can open up a door. And I challenge people in that part of the book to really reimagine what mentoring is about. Mentoring traditionally has been about a relationship, a long-term relationship where you learn something. And I think that's an old-fashioned notion today. I mean, who wants to be a mentor? It's like, okay, yeah, I don't have enough to do. I'll take on another job. But me speaking as a person who connects with a lot of people, I'm perfectly welcome the opportunity to introduce someone to another person who can help them, who can open up a new door, who can take them to the next level of their business. I do that every single day, and I can see these sparks set new stages of momentum in motion. And so that's really what I think the role of mentoring is. As you seek a mentor, it's a new mindset. And as I think it's a new way to think about being a mentor and the power we all have to create sparks in others that can send ripples through history, literally change history by helping other people open new doors and create new connections.
I think it's a very powerful observation, Mark, and sharing it. I read a book recently by Russell Brunson, and he quotes a lady called Dana Derrick. And Dana Derrick talks about her Dream 100. And Russell Brunson, for example, to get his now, I think, I think he's in the hundreds of millions of dollars of turnover now. I think Russell Brunson's platform now, ClickFunnels. He chased 600 people. He's to take it to a whole strategic new level, and ended up with about 100. And he took 10 years for him, to example, to get to meet and get Tony Robbins to actually promote him. Took him 10 years. So the Dream 100 is a book by Dana Derrick that Russell Brunson used, and these are both mentors. Also, you said reaching up and reaching out. These are people that will help you reach out to a bigger audience and make a bigger difference. And I think that's what's really, really important, is that, and then I read a quote the other day, which I found fantastic. What are you doing today that will change tomorrow or be remembered tomorrow? I think that's really important. But the Dream 100 by Dana Derrick, I haven't read the book. I've read sort of just the concept. And Russell Brunson took it to a whole new level. And I think that's one of the big drivers of his success, is his relentless strategic pursuit of that.
It's something that has not been a strength for me. I'd be interested to hear your take on it, how it's affected your life. I grew up in a way where I had to be super self-reliant. I couldn't really depend on anybody when I was a kid. And so it's like, I don't need anybody. I don't need any help. I'll figure this out myself. And unfortunately, that has transcended to adulthood. And I have people like you who I can bounce ideas off of and get inspired, and that helps a lot. But I haven't really done a great job of really reaching out and asking for help from people. Were there people that sort of pulled you along into new levels of success in your life?
I haven't had any what I'd call personal mentors that I use. Just like you, I think in your book you mentioned that the internet, the digital world, the social media tribe, I think is the place where and also books have been my mentors. I think you can have physical books.
Yes.
I think you can have people as mentors, but for me, books have been my mentors as well.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yep.
And I can't remember if I included this. I think I included this in the book, but there's a kind of a thread about me and Tim Ferriss and this parallel move toward momentum in the book. And Ferriss at one point says that Benjamin Franklin and these and some physicists, these different authors have been mentors to them and to him, and they've been long dead. And I think that's the same point, is that you can learn, you can be inspired, you can be connected to in lots of different ways.
Oh, totally. And for me, one of my mentors is a man who's passed away and never met. I wish I had. Joseph Campbell, who died in 1987. But you can go and be mentored by him by listening to the videos. Bill Moyer's 6 1-hour video series, one of America's top interviewers. Bill Moyer's interviewed him shortly before he died, and it's a 6 1-hour series about the power of myth. And what I love about Joseph Campbell and he's mentoring me from his books is that he gets the essence of what it means to be human. And because myths are public dreams. Dreams are, I think, trying to think of the right term, but he had an aha moment about, I'm trying to remember it now, but myths are public dreams. Dreams are private myths.
Oh my goodness. I have to think about that for a while.
And that was his aha moment. And he went on a journey for the next 4 decades to write and capture all the stories of humanity, from religions to tribes to
Wow.
society,
Wow.
including fairy tales. And what myths are a way of making sense of what we don't make sense. It's trying to make sense of the unconscious, and myths have common threads, and that's why he wrote the story arc called The Hero's Journey, that's been used by some of the top movies in the world. George Lucas used them to create Star Wars.
Yes.
And guess what? The hero's journey story arc, and it can be a simple step by step of up to only 5 or 6, or it can be 12 or 15, something along those lines. It gets to the essence of being human, and it resonates with every one of us, because myths are humans trying to make sense of what they don't understand. And it gets to the heart of being human, which, as we grow a bit, have a bit of experience, we reflect on a bit. So, it's fascinating to find out. And we all go, what drives us? I remember writing content for 4 years, 5 days a week, getting up at 4:30 a.m. and writing and creating content for 4
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
And I'm going, where did this power come from? Where did this force show up? It's almost like I was being called by a force.
Yeah.
And I think, I think all great deeds and men and women are called. And I think there is a force that sometimes shows up. We don't know where it comes from or what creates it. But then you've got to double down. And I think you've really got to take the opportunity to just tap that force.
I remember those days. We were all wondering about you too, where it came from. How is he doing this? Yeah, you were amazing.
I got up at 4:30 a.m. before the day job, and I wrote for 4 hours. And by 9
Yeah.
a.m., I'd written an email, I'd written the post, I'd hit publish on WordPress, I'd written the email, and I'd sent it out. And I'm still today trying to work out where did this. It was a primal force.
But what a glorious thing. If you think about the story that you talked about, Joseph Campbell, and this aha moment that led to his path, and this sort of thing kind of led to your path as well. And I think my path is still I'm still learning, I'm still refining in a way. I think the trajectory of my work over the last 10 years has been helping people figure out how do I become the signal instead of the noise.
Yep.
I've been writing about influence marketing and content shock and how to develop your personal brand and the new marketing techniques that matter to people today. And now cumulative advantage, how to build momentum, because it's so busy today. Even if you're great, you're being buried. Even if you're great,
Mm-hmm.
you might not ever be heard or seen. And so we need to think about something beyond that. What about momentum? So that's sort of been my path. I don't know if it will be as epic as Joseph Campbell or you, but it's interesting to think about what might be next.
Well, you are on your path, and I think you've had your calling and you've answered it and you've acted on it. And that leads me to the last step, which I think is really, really important, and we've touched on it. Um, it's constancy.
Yeah. Well, and you just mentioned why that's important, because once you found your opening, once you sort of had that aha thing, you didn't let it go. You pursued it like a beast. You were consistent, you were tenacious, and whenever things would knock you down, you would just stay the course. I think, look, you and I were starting 2008, 2009. That was a recession. It wasn't an easy time to be starting things. Uh, and even now, I'm on a path, you're on a path, and here we are. Economic issues, pandemic, civil justice, the streets are burning. So, how do we adjust? How do we stay our course? So the idea of constancy of purpose is it's staying the course even when things go bad. To surround yourself with the resources and the people and the vision and the grit to persist. And that's not to say you don't have to be aware, that you don't have to pivot when it's appropriate to pivot, but you don't get into what Jim Collins calls the doom loop, that you just panic, you abandon your path. This is what I tell everybody, Jeff, that I think is very relevant to this idea. I'm doing a lot of personal coaching right now. That's my contribution to the world right now. When I see people who are confused and suffering, and maybe they're facing a lot of loss, I just say, hey, let's have a call. Let's just connect. And when the pandemic started, a lot of people thought, oh, we're going to have a lot of time on our hands. I'm going to write that book. I'm going to get that beach body. I'm going to learn another language. And what we all are realizing, I think, is the most heroic thing we could do right now is land on the other side, to arrive on the other side intact with our life and our finances and our family and our relationships. And that's what I'm counseling people right now, is just get through this year and don't make decisions that are going to take you so far off your path you're not going to be able to recover. Do what it takes to get through this year, land on the other side, but stay on the path.
Yeah, I think we need to remind ourselves that as humans we are creators, and but to be a creator, you also need to feed with inspiration. I think for me, it's books, it's watching Joseph Campbell video interviews, it's listening to podcasts, it's listening to inspirational teachers and people such as yourself. And basically, you need to feed yourself so you can actually then create and then share it with the world. And I think for me, a lot of people don't give themselves the permission to actually sit down, spend some time and read in of areas of interest that they're passionate about, because you can't create something out of a vacuum. You've got to sit down and you've got to give yourself the permission to read. And I'm sure you read a lot, watch a lot, and my phone is my little note taker. I'm pulling out notes app all the time, and it's just a sentence. It could be on a walk. It could be a sentence from a book. It could even be a screenshot or a photo taken of a page of a book, an inspiration I share via email. And these then are the inspiration points that then turn into a bunch of information that, as authors, you need to distill, and which is what you do well, distill that into making sense and to creating frameworks. And I think that's the other thing that you've tried to do, is try to create a framework that
Mhm.
makes sense to you from the noise that's been around you. So your signal is distillation from the
Yes.
noise that you've been watching and aware of.
Right. That's exactly right. And it took me a long time to figure this out about myself because by the time I was 30, I really was pretty clear about all the things I was bad at. And then sometime in my early 30s, I realized that I did have this ability to see patterns and I can see where trends lead and where we need to go next. That's not something you know when you're 18. And that's why I think I became good at marketing because I can see these patterns, I can see these trends, I can sort of see where we need to be next. And you see that in the books. I distill a lot of research, a lot of ideas, and weave it into this narrative that I think helps people make sense of the world.
And I think you've done it very well, which then leads to my next question. You talked about connecting the dots and then trying to identify what are the next trends. So, in the world of business and marketing, Mark, what do you think are some of the trends that are emerging that people need to be aware of that can make a big difference to their both personal lives or to their business lives as entrepreneurs?
Yeah. Well, I think that there's a few that come to mind, and we'll start at the highest level. I think right now it's really a time for every business person and every marketing person to be humble and be open to thinking about your customers or relearning about your customers because through this pandemic we're going to see a lot of things big and small change in unexpected ways. There's going to be lots of unintended consequences. um, just it takes about 30 days for a behavior to become a habit. And for many of us, we've had to live in different circumstances for a lot longer than 30 days throughout this pandemic. Now, this has been a painful time, but from a marketing academic point of view, this is fascinating
It
to
is.
sort of dream about how this is going to show up. For example, I think a big megatrend, Jeff, people are going to seek comfort for a long time. I think comfort foods, comforting memories, nostalgia, marketing that plays on nostalgia, entertainment that plays on nostalgia and comfort and things that make us feel whole and good and safe are going to be big things in marketing. Even technology that keeps us safe, things that new innovations where we don't have to touch things anymore. Uh, Someone was asking me. I got interviewed by the Wall Street Journal yesterday. This reporter was doing a story about all these businesses have gone into the mask business. Is that sustainable? No, not in the long term. However, if you look, you've been to China and you've been to Japan, and you know a lot of people before the pandemic were wearing masks. Can that be changing the culture in Western cultures now? So I think that's a big mega trend. Another mega trend that I think is fascinating and frightening, to be honest, is this developing area called synthetic content, where the tools to create Hollywood quality, CGI quality, Star Wars quality, fake film is going to be in the hands of everyone for almost no money, requiring almost no skills. All you need is a still photo and a voice file from someone, and you can create realistic Hollywood quality fakes. Now, the beautiful part of this is it's going to unleash an amazing new form of content creation. It's also going to create perhaps an existential threat to news and democracy. And so that's something that we need to be aware of. Unfortunately, governments and regulations are not keeping up with some of the foundational issues that are going to have to be addressed. But we need to start this path of awareness. I think finally, the last thing I'll add is I think the future of social media is going to be really upended in the next few years. In many cases, these platforms are based in America, and there's a point now, an inflection point. We're reevaluating what is going on with big tech. Is this healthy? These monopolies, are they good or are they bad? How do we coexist with this power that they have? How does this impact free speech? How does it impact politics? To what extent should it be regulated? And this is about the only thing in America across the aisle both parties agree on, is that we need to look at these monopolies, examine the power that they have, and there are going to be huge implications in the next, I predict, 18 months for how these go forward. And it's going to be what we talked about, Jeff, a fracture in the status quo. There's going to be new opportunities. Clubhouse is filling a niche. It's a Clubhouse. What's the fracture in the status quo? People are isolated. People are lonely. They want to connect. They want to have conversations. And a lot of people have a lot of time on their hands right now. Opens up the opportunity for Clubhouse that probably wouldn't have opened up 2 years from now. So there's going to be lots of fractures in the status quo around social media, around marketing. We're not going to even recognize what marketing looks like 2 years from now. It's going to be so different from where we are today.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think there's some great insights there. And you mentioned Clubhouse, which actually joined up on March 1 this year. Just to give you an idea of how powerful tech is and how quickly you can create it. Clubhouse was written in 1 week. It was coded in 1 week.
Yeah.
Now, here it is. I think it's got 6 million users now. It's hit a nerve. It's found the seam. Will that seam shut in the next few months? Potentially. Who knows? We're about to find out.
Yeah.
We saw some, streaming video on Twitter years ago that didn't eventuate, but now guess what? Video streaming is big time. So yeah, we're living in very interesting times in terms of the role of AI. Just because we can, should we? I think it's a question we've got to ask.
Yeah.
And because I think we've got to be careful that we don't that social media and big tech doesn't dehumanize us. And a friend of mine, she shared it with me a couple of years ago. She said the trouble with social media is that we judge our insides by the outsides of others. And I think, and that's one of the reasons I don't spend much time in Facebook streams or Twitter streams, because everyone's got polished faces showing their best life, and you're going, I'm not living up to that. And I think there's some real issues regarding anxiety and depression that are being fed.
And that's another piece of the seam of Clubhouse. In America right now, you cannot get an appointment with a therapist. The co-host of my podcast told me she tried to make an appointment with a therapist, and they said that it'll be 5 months. And what I'm hearing on Clubhouse is this outpouring of anxiety and angst and fear and grief over loss. And one woman the other day, a young woman, was talking about, there's just so much anxiety for me about even creating a social media profile.
Wow.
I'll spend hours thinking about the right photograph to use. And it made my heart sink. I just throw stuff up there. It's like, I am who I am. I don't even, my Clubhouse photo is a picture of me holding a donut because it's just a picture that I like. I don't even know what it says about me. I can't even eat donuts anymore. And, but it just made my heart sink that there's so much pressure on image and perfection and this competition and FOMO and imposter syndrome. And it's like, oh my gosh, what have we created in this world? Young woman, you are spectacular. I accept you for who you are. You are worthy. And and you can't say that on Clubhouse because there's only one person speaking at a time, essentially. But I just wanted to give this woman a virtual hug and say, you are worthy. You are worthy. Stay centered. Find that path and don't look back. And, but oh my gosh, you and I are blessed in some ways, Jeff, that we were able to really view our lives pre-social media and know who we are pre-social media, that maybe help give us the confidence to stay centered in all the chaos.
Yeah, it's I'm grateful every day that I'm in where I am. I'd already won the lottery. I was born in Australia.
Yeah, right.
I was born to loving parents. I had
Yeah.
a mum. I had a mum that was there every time I came home from school with a glass of freshly squeezed orange juice. And I'm so grateful. And my dad passed away recently, and now she's there, and she says, I wasn't a good mother. And I said, Mum, I'm going to tell you right now, you were. You were always there for me.
Yeah.
You were there with an open door and a glass of orange juice when I came home from school. That is a gift right there, and I'm grateful. And you were the best mum a child could ever have. So
Wow,
don't forget that.
that's the best words. There was a point. There was an incident when I was raising my son where I sort of lost my temper in an inappropriate way. And I really thought, I mean, I'm a good father. I have good parenting skills, but I was always ashamed that I lost my cool. And I talked about it with my son later. And I said, this has always just bothered me. I wanted to apologize. There was that day and we were on the baseball field, and I just lost my cool. And I was so angry. And I always worried about, what that meant. He said, Dad, I have no idea what you're talking about. He said, I don't even remember. I have no idea what you're talking about. So that puts things in perspective.
Yeah, exactly. So, Mark, I think what you've shared with your book, Cumulative Advantage, is awesome. And I think people should read it. I read it in 2.5 hours yesterday. So I did it in one
That's a
sitting.
record, I think.
But I think it will help people to gain some insights of what it means to be human, to seize their calling and make a difference, and at the end of the day, have advantage and change the world in some way, whether it's small or great. And I think it's your best book, and so glad to call you my friend, and look forward to catching up sometime in the future. So how can we... Here's the book, by the way, everyone.
Cumulative Advantage. Got the Mandalorian on the cover.
Yeah. And so look forward to catching up in real life. And how can they find you, Mark? And how can they
it's
get the
easy.
book?
You don't have to remember how to spell Schaefer. Just remember businesses grow. If you can remember businesses grow, you can find my my blog, my podcast, my books, my social media connections. And I'd love to connect with you. And you never know. Jeff and I started out on Twitter. It was like the hurricane from Australia was like taking over the world with his content. He was a force to be reckoned with. And I mean, he commanded attention, and you never know. So, I mean, let's connect on social media, and maybe that sort of relationship can develop between me and some new friends as well. So, Jeff, thank you so much. It means so much to me that you read the book. It means even more that you love the book, because I respect you so much. So thank you so much for your support.
It's a pleasure, Mark, and look forward to seeing you soon in real life.
All right.
Do you have a business idea, or are you planning to build your personal brand online? Whatever may be your purpose, the journey to building anything online starts with a domain name. And don't take this lightly. I mean, anything just long and clunky domain name would affect your branding in a negative way. When picking a domain name, consider going for something that is meaningful, relevant, brandable, global, and more. And the new domain extension that checks all these boxes and more is .online. Since it's a relatively new domain extension, most good domain names are still available, which means you can get the domain name you want easily on .online. And what's more, it's the perfect way to let the world know that you're online. So make the most of this branding opportunity and get your very own .online domain for 90% discount for the first year using my code Jeff, JEFF in capital letters, at www.get.online.